I got to ask you about this because I did Gary Burbank, and you probably know. Obviously, Gary's idol was Gary Owens.
Right.
Hence the Burbank, California, and Gary. That's how he got that. You're like the boss of Gary Owens. What was that like? Like, what kind of a guy was he? How was that? Just take us through that.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight NBC, the Not Bad Crowd, proudly presents the 100th Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
And me, I am Gary Owens. With these words, for those of you at home celebrating your 100th anniversary, you better take it easy.
Boy, that's a good question. It's probably the most asked question. People say, well, what was it like working with Gary Owens? Well, first of all, Gary was the highest paid person on the staff. He made, just to put it in perspective, twice the money that the morning person made. And then my salary was way down that list. But Gary earned every penny of that. Tell you an interesting story about Gary, Pat. Gary was a serious man. He had started off as a cartoonist with a newspaper. He had childhood diabetes, which is one of those diseases that plagues you the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And because of that, Gary was he was an emotional guy. His sugar would go up, his sugar would go down. And so he really did a good job. I mean, he would have a bowl of fruit in his studio. If he felt his sugar was in the wrong direction, he would compensate for it. But an emotional man. Gary, by his nature, people always say, what a funny guy. Gary was maybe one of the least funny air talents I've ever met. And I say that very respectfully.
Yeah.
Because he was a very kind and gentle man, a nice man, a smart man, a serious man, a devoted man, devoted to radio and to his faith and his wife. But Gary was not spontaneously funny. Gary was on the air for 3 hours every day. And for 4 hours, you couldn't disturb Gary before his show because he was at a typewriter writing what he was going to say that afternoon. Every little thing that you hear Gary Owens say was written out on a 3x5 card. That's how he got that sense, that bright sense of intellect that he had. He would laugh. He'd come up with something funny, and he'd type it, and he'd read the card out loud. We'd hear him, and it was like he broke himself up. Yeah, he was so smart. Yeah, that humor did not come naturally, but he had this sense of transparency. He could see beyond the obvious and look for angles on stories that were just so funny. He was a treat to work for. I really enjoyed. I say work for him, because I did. I worked for him.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating. It's cool to hear stuff like this because no one ever tells you these things, and if you're not there, how would you know? You'd have to work at Laugh-In or work at the station, just like it. So when he's writing, just curious. No, I was going to go to the last question, but now you piqued my interest. When he's writing for those 4 hours, and you're saying, and then during the show he's reading it, is he reading the whole show word for word, or is he ad-libbing a little bit in between, or hardly at all?
I would say there's very little spontaneity. He was one of those people that believed in planned, prepared organization.
Yeah.
A lot of the good ones were that way.
Yeah.
I know Don Imus and also Larry Lujak. Larry used to refer to it as planned dishevelment. It was like, on the air, it was like, well, little Tommy, what are we going to do now? Oh, I don't know. But every word of that had been thought out in advance. Planned dishevelment. I like that. It sounds like they're always shuffling papers. And to some extent, Gary had that same thing going. He was believed. There was a sign, by the way, I'm just going back. WLS had a sign on the wall that said, make it pop, P-O-P. Planned, organized presentation. I was like that. And that's how Gary was. Gary was very structured. The good ones always are. The amazing part about this is, these air talents, they don't have to go to 8 years of college to be terrific. They just have to realize that 90% of them are mediocre. So all they have to do is work a little harder, and they can be in that 1 or 2% that makes a lot of money.